Vyper 0.4 allows us to import other contracts. Here I have a simple function called multiply, which takes in two inputs and then multiplies it and then returns the product. Notice that this function is a pure function. Importing pure functions and then using it is straightforward. However, when the contract involves state variables, it's a little bit more complicated, so I'll explain that in the next video. In this video, so let's say that we have a pure function. For this example, we have a simple function called multiply. And we're going to import this library and then use this function in another contract. So the multiply function is inside math.vy. And let's say that we wanted to import it inside this example.vy. There are several ways to import this. The simplest way is to say import math. Now the naming is important here, since if you look at the folder structure, both the math.vy file and the example.vy file are in the same folder. And also, the naming is important. Here, I named it lowercase math. And inside here, I imported lowercase math. If you want to alias this, you can also say import math as, for example, let's say m. We can also say from the current directory, import math. And we can also say from the current directory, import math as m. So these are several ways to import the math library. For this example, let's just say import math. Okay, and to use the function multiply inside the math contract, let's create a simple example. Let's say external, and let's make this function pure. Def, let's call this call math mul, and then pass in two inputs, x uint 256, y uint 256, then return uint 256, and then say return. To call the function multiply inside the contract math, we'll say math.mul and then pass in x and y. So this is a simple example of importing another contract and then calling a pure function in that contract. Now, if we were to say import math as m, then over here, what we'll have to do is rename math to m. Okay? Let's try compiling this contract. Now, notice that here I'm not using Remix. The reason is, Remix does not support importing other Vyper contracts. So to show you this, I'm going to show you this using a terminal. Inside the terminal, first make sure that Vyper is installed. The Vyper compiler is installed. You can do this by checking Vyper version. Then you should see that the Vyper version is 0.4. Okay, to compile the contract, let's say Vyper, and then type the example contract, example.vy. If the contract compiles successfully, you'll notice a long string of hexadecimals will be printed out. Okay, I showed you an example of importing a contract and then calling a pure function in that contract. In this example, both of the contracts were in the same folder. But what happens if one of the contract is in another folder? For example, let's say that we have a folder called lib, and then let's say that the math library is in here. Okay, so we have the example contract over here. And then we have a folder called lib, which contains the contract called math. So if we try to compile the contract, you'll notice that the contract does not compile since it doesn't recognize where this math contract is located at. To fix this, you'll need to say lib.math. And over here, I don't want to say lib.math. So what I'm going to do over here is say as math. And then over here, I can change this to simply math.mul. Okay, let's try compiling the contract again. Okay, and our contract compiled.